Hello everyone. So it is a cool Saturday morning. I'm not even gonna say cool, it's cold. Our wind chills were down in the 20s last night. Right now it's around 34, 35 degrees. It's about 10 o'clock and it's warmed up a little bit, but I'm seeing a ton of videos coming out, tons of posts on the Facebook forums and stuff like that pertaining to cold starts. Now this is obviously going to mainly talk about 7.3 and 6.0, but it's going to apply to pretty much all your Huey and diesel engines. So with that being said, let's dive into it. We just finished Thanksgiving. It's getting to be that time of the year where it's getting colder, and a lot of new diesel owners out there are a little confused. They're confused about plugging in their trucks. They're confused about their glow plugs or grid heaters. They're confused about fuel additives. And I'm going to try to answer this the best I can. There's a lot of debate. If you disagree with me, that's fine. Please leave your comments in the comment section. I'm always up for healthy discussions. Just keep it respectful. You know, don't be bashing on anybody or anything like that. Everybody's got their own opinions, and there's a lot of variables, because if you live in some place that gets cold for a day or two, like North Carolina, or if you're in a place that stays really hot and doesn't really get super cold, like Texas or Arizona, or if you're in New York or Colorado, your experiences are going to be vastly different. So just keep that in mind. Never mind all of our friends up there in Canada and all that good stuff. I've been blessed to live pretty much all up and down the east coast of the United States. I've lived 20 minutes south of Canada. I've lived in North Carolina, obviously Virginia, many other places. And with that being said, I do have a pretty wide range of experiences when it comes to starting many different types of diesels in the cold. Now, with your 7.3s, and really with any diesel, the first step is going to be making sure that you have strong batteries. If your batteries are 3 or 4 years old, it's probably getting time. Batteries nowadays just aren't made to the same quality. If you're running 4-year-old batteries, you're actually doing pretty good. You've kind of beat the odds, and you've got a decent set of batteries. I know people look at the voltage and say, oh, it still turns over, but there's a lot of other factors. When you have a diesel that has glow plugs or a grid heater, there's a huge tax on your electrical system, especially when it gets really cold. Not only do you need a lot of RPMs to start, and RPMs are what really help your truck start, but you also need those cold cranking amps. So batteries are number one. Second is your starter. If your truck starts slowly or cranks slowly in warm weather, it's going to be worse than cold. All diesels like RPMs, especially with cold starting. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a Cummins, Detroit, powerstroke, you name it, RPMs are your friend. One big thing I've seen a lot of recently is questions about plugging in your truck. So when it comes to plugging in your truck, on a 7.3 specifically, if your truck starts down to about 50 degrees without problem, the good news is your Huey injection and your mechanical side of your engine are probably good. You probably have good compression. When you get down in the 40s, if it starts struggling, you probably have either an electrical system problem or a glow plug issue. It's that simple. I see tons of guys start freaking out because it starts to get cold and all of a sudden their trucks don't start. They start worried about compression. If it was starting good when it was 50 degrees, your compression's probably fine. Then they start seeing a little bit of white smoke. Guys, when it gets cold, especially on these older diesels, you're going to get a little white smoke. My truck that I'm currently in doesn't, but I take very good care of it and I maintain it meticulously. But it's not uncommon for healthy used diesels to get a little white smoke on startup. Glow plugs and cold starting aids are critical. So if you've never replaced them, or if they've never been replaced in the life of the truck, probably time. They do wear out over time. Actually, we worked on a 2013 Duramax just the other day, 10-year-old truck, and sure enough, it had 2 glow plugs out on it. Now that didn't initially show up. We had to do an ohm test to find that out, but we did. 2 of them had failed. Some of these trucks are 20 or 30 years old now, so keep that in mind. When it comes to getting down to the 30s, if the truck just will not start when it gets down to the 30s, then it's very likely that you have a glow plug issue. Starting fluid is what everybody goes to. Oh, it starts fine if I give it a huff of starting fluid. do not, if you can absolutely help it, use starting fluid on any diesel, but especially a diesel that has starting aids. Some people will tell you it's fine if you disconnect the glow plugs. I disagree, because what you're doing is you're creating a situation where you have uncontrolled ignition advance. At that point in time, the ejectors are not what's firing the combustion cycle at that point in time. It is just whatever gets warm up. So you could have 50 or 60 degrees of timing advance, and you'll see it sometimes with people that go in and spray really heavy on the starting fluid. They'll go to crank it, crack. It's because they had a cylinder going up and a cylinder that wasn't quite ready to go on the other stroke, and they're fighting against each other. It's a good way. It causes a lot of stress on your bearings. It can definitely bend rods over time. It could cause piston ring issues. It's really hard. Now, if you have to use starting fluid, what my recommendation is, that's it. One puff, give it about 5 seconds, then crank it. And what I would normally do is I would crank the truck for 5 to 10 seconds, stop, go over, spray it, give it about 3 or 4 more seconds, and crank it. That's it. You see guys all the time, so you see spit coming out of my mouth. That little bit is too much. You don't need a ton of starting fluid. If you're putting that much starting fluid in to start it, something is wrong, or you're in like Antarctica. It really should not take a whole lot, and once it's hitting, it should be pretty good to go. Especially on Huey injection engines, guys. These engines are not they should not be hard starting. I can tell you I've done testing down to 50 and 40 degrees without any glow plugs, and a 7.3 should start with absolutely no starting aid at about 50 degrees if it's healthy. 40 degrees, it should still start, but it becomes a little harder, and once you get into 30s, it won't unless you're doing something else or you just crank the heck out of it. And sometimes you can still get to start even at 30 degrees. So another big thing with these trucks is your glow plug relays. We had a situation where a customer had put a aftermarket relay on the truck, and it had failed. Everything tested good, but within just a month, it had failed. Another situation on my truck, previous owner had put a aftermarket relay, and it actually stuck in the odd position. These relays are pretty tiny. They also sit in the valley of the engine, and they're pretty prone to heat damage. If you're going to replace them, get a Ford one. This one is an older one that obviously was made in America. I don't think they still make them in America. But a better option is to do something like this. This is a White Rogers. You can get them from many different locations. Very good relay. You can see the size difference here. That's a huge comparison. I mean, look at that. You can, with some modification, mount this in the valley in the stock location. What I prefer to do is to actually modify the harness a little bit and mount this on the firewall on the passenger side, near the fender. It gets it away from the heat source. It makes it really easy to access if I need to. And I mean, these things are monstrous. Sometimes you will notice better starting with these. Not all the time. If this is healthy, it really shouldn't. But I have seen it where you put, only modification being done to the truck is the White Rogers relay or a similar aftermarket relay of this size. And all of a sudden, it seems like the truck starts a little bit better. Don't know why that is. My only guess is maybe there's just a little bit less resistance. Maybe more current is actually getting to the glow plugs. But it does seem to make a little bit of a difference. All right, moving on. We've talked about that enough. So now that everything else is going good on the truck, you've replaced your glow plugs, you got good batteries, your starter's good, your relay's good, all your wiring's good, you checked all your grounds, cleaned all your grounds. What about plugging in your truck? What about fuel supplements? Diesel in America right now kind of sucks. It's been ever since we've gotten away from low sulfur diesel, and now that we're past that into ultra low sulfur diesel, there's not as much lubrication in it. However, for most places that get cold weather, you're gonna already have access to winter diesel fuel. When it starts getting down below 0 Fahrenheit, yes, I'll start adding additives. Especially if you're up north. Once again, if you're up in New York or Canada or any place like that where you're seeing -20, -30 degrees, probably a good idea to add a little bit extra winter additive to your diesel fuel. It should already be in there, but I have seen people in the north have their filters frozen on fast air dogs, even on stock fuel filter housings. It does happen, especially if you get fuel that has a little bit of water in it or has been contaminated. It could cause a lot of issues. Before that, if your idea of cold is -20 degrees, I'm sorry, not -20, 20 degrees Fahrenheit, correction, you really don't need additive in my opinion. It's good to add it just because of the added lubricity, but it's not a must. It's not going to, you should not be experiencing fuel gelling at 32 degrees or 20 degrees or even down into the teens or possibly even single digits, unless you're getting fuel from a really bad source. And once again, by this part of the season, after Thanksgiving, almost every place is getting winter diesel or starting to get winter diesel. It should not be an issue that you are facing. I would make sure you're getting fuel from a good source and not really worry about it. Unless you are seeing below 0 regularly. If you're constantly seeing below 0, then yes, add something to it because you do not want your system freezing, because then you got to call somebody like me and I'm going to be angry because it's going to be, -20 and I'm coming out to work on your truck and laying in the snow and the cold and all that good stuff, and it's not fun. So with that being said, if you are in a cold place, do add it, but once again, for probably 90% of you, probably not an issue. Finally, plug it in your truck. I see it all the time. People asking, do I need to plug in my truck? Do I need to plug it in overnight? Do I set it on a timer? My recommendation is if you got to plug it in, put it on a timer. The reason I say that is because there's really no point of having your truck constantly hooked up. These elements are similar to a water heater element. They are very inefficient, especially whenever they're sitting under your hood outside and surrounded by, freezing cold temperatures. What it's going to do is it's going to kick on. It's going to run constantly, and it's going to suck energy like crazy. There's really no point, in my opinion, to have it run more than 2 or 3 hours before you have to use the truck. The one exception would be is if you are in an extremely cold environment, and I'm talking like -30 or at least down past -20s. If you're experiencing, below -10, -15, that might require longer because it's going to take a long time to get that temperature back up. But for the majority of you, if you put it on a 2 or 3 hour timer before you have to leave or whatever you typically leave for work, it should be fine. It is nice. I used to plug my truck in often. It is nice to be able to go out and, have heat within, 5 minutes of driving, not have to let your truck idle for 10 minutes to get it up to temperature, that kind of stuff. But it's not a must. Once again, if everything else is working on your truck properly, you should not have to plug it in. I don't care if it's -10 degrees. It should still start pretty easily. If you're having to plug your truck in, once again, whenever it's getting below 40 degrees, it's probably because you have a glow plug or cold starting issue. If the truck is healthy, you should not have to do that at all. But it does take some wear and tear off the truck, and it is a good idea. So if you can plug in your truck, especially if you know it's going to be cold, well below freezing, or having, -20 or 30 wind chills, good idea, just set it on a timer. Now, if you really want to, you can leave it plugged up all the time. Lots of guys do it. I have in the past. The biggest thing is you're going to see it's going to impact your electrical bill at some point, because it is like running a water heater element, like in a non-insulated container constantly. And so it's going to draw some amperage. I think they vary a lot on size, but they're somewhere between 500 and like 1500 watts. Some of them on the commercial side go even higher. So, I mean, imagine running a space heater outside and constantly running that. It's not going to end well. So I hope this helps, guys. Like I said, I'm not trying to bash on anybody. Everybody's got different ideas. The key takeaways are, don't use starting fluid unless you absolutely have to. Use it very sparingly, and then fix your truck right so you're not using it constantly, because it will lead to issues. Yes, you could plug your truck in overnight if you want to. Just remember, I don't assume any responsibility for that. I would not recommend it just because of the electrical draw and obviously it could be a fire hazard. But if you're going to do so, set it on a timer. Your truck should start, once again, with no problem below zero, easily. But if you're getting to the situation where your truck starts fine all summer long and all of a sudden it's cold and it doesn't start, you probably have a glow plug or heating or cold starting aid issue. So start there. Anyway, guys, I hope this helps. For you 7.3 guys, check out the White Roger stuff. I'm a big fan of it. As always, guys, be safe all the way. Happy late Thanksgiving. Merry Christmas. Be safe all the way.